Multi-ethnic church is certainly, in my view, a good thing. I mean, I'm Mr. Multi-ethnic church, but I think we need to be clear when we talk about multi-ethnic church as Christians that gospel unity and multi-ethnic church are not exactly the same thing. So that in theory, a church could have diverse people that don't love one another. So just because there's diversity doesn't mean necessarily that there's gospel unity. But on the other hand, a church could be monoethnic because of the geography of the church and yet still be pursuing unity with one another in the gospel. So when people ask me, should every church be multi-ethnic? My response is always this, that the church should look like its community. So if the community in which the church exists is multi-ethnic, then the church or the churches in those communities should intentionally pursue the diverse people in the community in which they exist. Otherwise, they're not being a gospel witness in their community. So let me clarify that point, though. It doesn't mean a church that is monoethnic in a multi-ethnic community doesn't believe the gospel. That's not the point. The point is that when churches are placed in communities that are multi-ethnic, churches should not be content with monoethnicity. They should be willing to pursue the diverse people in their communities that they find, because Jesus died for some from every tongue, tribe, people, and nation, and some of those tribes and peoples and nations are in our very own community. So then we intentionally pursue all people with zeal and with passion and with a great desire to see all people unified in Christ. But there are occasions where churches, for a variety of reasons, are in monoethnic communities. I mean, I grew up in a very rural part of eastern Kentucky, and my little town had very few minorities. We only had, as minorities, black minorities. We didn't have any other different ethnic groups in the community, so it was all white and a few black people in the community. And so it would be impossible for the church that transformed my life to be multi-ethnic. But that church, predominantly white, Southern Baptist Church, I was the first person of color to join that church personified for me reconciliation and Christian unity, as the members of that church and the people in that church loved me in ways that were greater than some people in my very own family. And so again, I don't think that church then or now could ever be multi-ethnic. Why? There's not a lot of diversity there. So for those churches that don't have an opportunity to be multi-ethnic because their context does not provide the diverse multi-ethnicity, those churches can still pursue Christian unity in other ways in their context. But even ethnically, they can pray for the nations. They can serve the nations. They can take mission trips, right? They can partner with churches in other communities that are from different ethnic groups, but that share the same theology, that are like-minded theologically. And I think another thing that needs to be said about this as well is that when we think about multi-ethnic church, and this is so very important, we're not simply talking about more minorities who go to predominant white spaces and become assimilated within predominant white culture. So when I think multi-ethnic church, I mean vetted, godly, qualified diversity from the pulpit to the pew, so that you have red and yellow, black and white pastors serving this red and yellow, black and white church. When you see ethnic groups submitting to the leadership of different ethnic groups for no other reason other than Jesus has done something in their heart, that is a glorious manifestation of the gospel that is uniquely seen in a multi-ethnic context. Now, again, I always got to clarify things here. Certainly, monoethnic contexts gloriously display the gospel. But if you go to a multi-ethnic church, a healthy, gospel-centered multi-ethnic church, where it is apparent that there are people here who are different, And there are people who are in leadership who are different, and yet they're unified in the gospel. They're unified in a big God theology. There's something about that experience that makes you see God's glory in a way that you don't often see it displayed in places where everybody is the same ethnically. And it's not to say that those places are less God-honoring. It is just to say that when you get people together who have no earthly reason to be together other than they love Jesus and they therefore love each other, that is powerful. So inasmuch as God will let churches be in places where that can happen, then we should pursue that with intensity.
Thanks for watching Honest Answers. You can submit your questions by email, Twitter, or in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe to find out the answer to next Wednesday's question.